Oh. All right. I'm sure by the end of the month we'll have we'll have all this under our belt. I have a couple of notices that need reading. The first is a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given by the clerk. If assistance is required, please see the clerk, Madam Kokolas on my left. And once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of the town hall. So please take your coats with you. Also, the Town of Lincoln Committee and Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel and are therefore easily accessible for previewing. I would like to thank the public for attending the meeting this evening and our guests as well. I want to remind everyone of our rules of engagement to please be respectful while others are speaking, to please refrain from clapping. Delegations will have 5 minutes to speak and are asked to stay focused on the agenda item. Please silence all of your electronic devices. The Shononton people have called these lands home for thousands of years, and more recently, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee have been sharing the land as one dish, one spoon treaty territory. We would like to acknowledge the enduring resilience of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who call this territory home. The roll call of council, I will begin with Deputy Mayor Diane Rengima to my right. To her right is Ward 1 Councillor Adam Russell, Ward 2 Councillors, Councillor Tony Brunet and Councillor J.D. Pachariva. To my left, Ward 3 Councillors, Councillor Paul McPherson and Councillor Mike Mikulik, Ward 4 Councillors Lynn Timmers and Councillor Greg Reimer. We have a number of staff that are here this evening. I want to acknowledge them and thank them for attending. All staff that are here are directly related to the subject matter before us on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest, councillors? There being none, we have 2 delegations this evening. Each delegation may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Our first delegation is Mishka Balsam and Hugo Cheshire. Please come forward from the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and they are speaking to item 7.2 PD 0119, cannabis retail in the town of Lincoln. Okay. Welcome, Mishka.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, Mayor Easton, councillor, staff, and members of the public. My name is Mishka Balsam, and I'm the CEO and President of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. I'm joined this evening by Hugo Cheshire, our Director of Government Affairs and Policy. On behalf of our 1,600 members, I wish to address you on the topic of retail cannabis in your community. As we've heard and we will hear tonight, tonight's decision is not one about whether cannabis will be bought or consumed in Lincoln. The decision is on whether we wish that those sales to be made by legitimate business owners who create jobs and pay taxes, whether we want cannabis sales to be more controlled and to be sold to adults, and it is whether we want the product to be pure and manufactured under rigorous standards. This is a rapidly growing industry, and Lincoln has the opportunity to be a part of it. If we begin now, we can create a homegrown retail industry that creates jobs and reinvests its profit right here. The cannabis market in Canada, including medical, legal, and illegal recreational products, is expected to generate up to $7.1 billion in total sales in 2019, according to a recent Deloitte report. Of that amount, legal sales are expected to contribute more than half, up to $4.3 billion in the first year. Similarly, the Parliamentary Budget Office has estimated that Canadians will spend between $4.2 to $6.2 billion on legal cannabis products in the first year after legalization. Policy Options estimates that cannabis sales in Ontario will be under around $1 billion in 2019, up to $1.6 billion in 2020, and nearly $2.4 billion by 2021. Sales near $3 billion and $600 million in tax revenues are possible in the mature market after a few years. This is Niagara's and Lincoln's chance to be part of this emerging market. This is often referred by your colleagues in other municipalities as being tomorrow's wine industry. The GNCs advocated on your behalf to control oversighting and licensing, an issue that has often been brought forward to us from the beginning, and we will continue to do so. That being said, with only 25 licenses being initially offered by the province and nearly half of those going to the GTA, Niagara will not be overrun by cannabis stores in the near future. The government provides funding to municipalities in 2 tranches of $15 million, each to be distributed according to the population. Those municipalities who opt in will receive funding from both. Those who do not will only receive funding from the second, even if they opt in later. To take a wait-and-see approach carries a financial penalty for the town of Lincoln. Given Lincoln's strengths as an agricultural region and the cannabis cultivation industry already thriving here, plus a post-secondary educational program being in place at Niagara College, this is an opportunity to support local industry and local jobs. This is also an opportunity to bolster Niagara's agribusiness and tourism sector. In time, the legal recreational cannabis will be another reason to visit Niagara and to visit Lincoln. We urge you to opt into the retail cannabis program, to support our growing cannabis industry here in the region, and to send a message that Lincoln is innovative, progressive, and open for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miska. All right, councillors, if you want to get into the queue, we'll proceed with questions, if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. Mishka, thanks for the presentation. Any idea right now the number of jobs in Niagara in the cannabis industry and what type of revenue that might be generating from a property tax perspective?
So now this is on hearsay because we've had a really hard time to actually look at it right now exactly where it's impacted, because it's growing and the industry is not just the growth industry, it also has to do with the educational sector and related businesses that are developing at the same time. So far, at one of the municipalities that outlined that Niagara-wide, it is hundreds of jobs at this point, and it's an industry so far reflected of about $400 million. But again, I don't have any specific stats. It hasn't been broken down into that.
Thank you.
I don't have any other questions. No? All right, I have a question, Mishka, and it goes to the comment that you made about the pureness of the product.
Yeah.
The pureness of the product at the moment. Are you able to give give the council and those in the audience any idea of what the circumstances are around the contaminated nature of and the risks involved in the current product that's available?
Right now with an opioid crisis in Niagara and an industry that is currently dominated and run by the black market. So there is little to no control over knowing the product that is getting into the hands of people who are using it. Neither is there any control over at what age it's being sold to. So I think by legalizing it, you have a significant higher control over the quality of product that you have. You have the opportunity to inform the consumers, because it is being consumed, about the strength of it. And I think those are controls and measures that are critically important Niagara-wide, Canada-wide right now for this industry. And the money that flows from it right now is going to actually a black market, and it's to knowing that this money actually flows back to the government, into to businesses, and to support industries is something that I think we need to support. And in the first place of why it ever was put in place by the current federal government is to actually change the power that the black market holds right now.
Okay, councillors, on the basis of that question, there may be some other questions. And Councillor Russell, you go ahead first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mishka, I'm not sure if you can answer this or give any insight into it, or maybe Hugo can. Do you have any insight from the government on when the next phase of expansion might be past those 25 licenses?
Both of us probably would answer the same way. The reason that only a limited number of licenses are being handed out right now is because of the shortage of product that is there. So that's the driving force right now. Now the industry and the manufacturing industry and the businesses that are the grow operations are saying that they're really very much committed towards making additional products available. I think the demand is significantly higher than what was expected. So we believe that by the end of December, an additional number of licenses are being made available. But hold on for 1 second. December is it, am I right? Yeah, December 2019 is when the next wave of licenses will become available. So we will have overcome that shortage of product that we're experiencing right now.
Thank you very much, Mishka, for your information, for
Madam
your
Mayor,
presentation.
I have a question. I think you've got me because you were in my seat.
Oh, of course, I was wondering about that.
Through you to
Go
Mishka.
ahead, Chair.
Mishka, can you make any comment around tourism and the impact of cannabis obviously in this town, tourism is a important part of our economic fabric. So can you make comment around that and the importance of cannabis?
Let me start with an anecdotal story on it. We have a relationship with the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. It's an economic development and chamber office that runs out of Buffalo and Niagara. And they have a CANAM Council, Canadian American Council. And I was asked recently to give a presentation on tourism. So I gave the presentation on tourism numbers and growth that we've experienced and so on. And at the end, I asked them for some questions that they had, and solely from all the people in attendance from south of the border, all the questions were related to cannabis. We have on our board of directors the GM for Cannabis Growth, which is a growth operation and one of the biggest ones in the country that's located in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And the growth idea when it comes to tourism is huge. They alone in Niagara-on-the-Lake look at actually creating an information tourist office, and that is located out of their location just to educate people about it and to make people learn about it. There's a huge interest in this industry. It's mystifying to people, and so I think there's a huge growth opportunity that's there. We also have to take a look at that later on this year. We're actually going to venture into edibles. And if you talk to Niagara College, who just a few months ago launched their commercial cannabis program that is there, they're looking at all of those facets as well. So I think we have a leadership opportunity here. We have approximately 14 million visitors coming to Niagara every year, and the interest is substantial.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you very much, Mason.
We'll move on now to our second delegate. Leanne is also speaking to item 7.2 PD 0119, cannabis retail in the town of Lincoln. Ms. McKinney, welcome.
Thank you.
And you have 5 minutes, and then I'll offer the opportunity for questions from
Okay.
the councilors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Easton. I think I'm going to just start by reading my letter because I think it captures everything that I'd like to get my point across, if that's okay with you. I know you all have a copy at this time. I've been a Lincoln, well, first of all, I just wanted to accept this comments as a plea to take action against all aspects of impacts of legalization of cannabis production, distribution, and consumption of marijuana products in our region. As a resident of Lincoln for the past 11 years and another 5 years in the Niagara region, we relocated our family to the Niagara region, specifically Beamsville, because of what our town offers. We were attracted to the natural beauty, the topography, the beautiful vineyards, world-class wineries, and a safe family-focused environment to raise our young family. We've seen how this area has grown and the continued focus it has kept on its family-focused, along with a commitment to draw tourism to our lovely wine region. Each year, we've seen a continued influx of tourists drawn to our area because of the natural beauty, world-class wineries that it has to offer. They've come here to escape the concrete and polluted communities and enjoy the fresh air and allure of our town and the region. I believe that with the allowance of cannabis greenhouses in our town, I'm going to talk about that, but I know we're here about the opt-out of the retail, but I just wanted to tag into that as well. I believe this will have a devastating impact on our communities. Residents should not have to live amongst the stench that will infiltrate our communities, and tourists will not want to continue to flock to our region to escape pollution and seek beautiful landscapes and topography, as they will be greeted by unsightly greenhouses emanating skunk-like stench, not to mention the oppressive light pollution. Will no longer be a sought-after tourist destination and a world-class wine region. Will just become another pot-growing town. We need to protect our town and its residents who have fought to keep our town and region beautiful, free of detrimental, environmentally impacting businesses and organizations that try to infiltrate our ecosystem, and continue to develop our region as a world-class wine region and tourist destination, along with a great place to raise a family. As for the allowance of cannabis retail stores in Lincoln, I strongly oppose this, and I'm encouraging an opt-out position for course of action of our town. Beamsville Chamber of Commerce has been diligently focused on beautifying our town business core with trying to attract better businesses to our community. I've seen the transformation over the past few years with existing businesses refacing and updating their facades, along with new vital businesses coming into our town. Our town's become a much more attractive and family-friendly place to stroll, dine, and shop. With the proposed infiltration of cannabis retail stores in our community, this will only serve to counteract all of the valuable improvements that our business core, in our business core that have been recognized to date and attract unsavory patrons. As parents of impressionable teenagers, I've already been forced to accept and challenge my morals and values as they pertain to marijuana use by the federal government. I don't want to have to drive by this on a daily basis. I think it would be an unfriendly reminder. Our residents and adolescents will be at heightened risk of using marijuana as these drugs become much more accessible within our community. It's been shown in Denver, Colorado, that places with retail stores or dispensaries in their neighborhoods and communities have experienced greater number of marijuana-related hospitalizations. Research also shows that increasing availability of substances increases consumption and related harms. Increasing availability of a substance can make it more socially acceptable to use and make people think it's less harmful to use. Increasing availability makes it easier for a person to obtain a substance by reducing its total cost to obtain. This can increase impulse purchases by experimental users, occasional users, and users who are just trying to quit. When a substance is easier to obtain, people are more likely to use it more. It can be expected that an increase in cannabis would increase social and harmful and health harms. For example, increased alcohol availability is associated with higher levels of violence, assault, public disturbances, alcohol-related motor vehicle fatalities, and collisions. So we're asking you to please take all of this into consideration when making your determination on the presence and support of cannabis retail and dispensaries and cannabis greenhouses in our communities. Let's look at the example that the stance that Oakville Council has recently taken opposing cannabis retail in their community directly supporting the votes of their residents and thereby protecting their community. And to date, there's also been over 70 municipalities across Ontario that have opted out of cannabis retail at this time. I know I'm going on and. I am. Yeah. So as far as Oakville is concerned, I know their council's expressed that they're not going to jump into anything until they have enough information to make an informative decision. So a decision to opt out can be reversed, but a decision to opt in cannot. It's final. So I am finished, and I hope you take these all into consideration. Thank you.
Just remain in place, and we'll see if there are any questions from councillors. Any questions, councillors? Oh, nothing? Yes, Councillor Mikulik?
Thank you, through you to the presenter. I'm just curious, thank you for coming and expressing your concerns. Just a question, do you happen to live near a cannabis facility that currently operates?
But I mean, I've seen them as I drive through. I know on the highway, I see that monstrosity that they're building on the service road. I've seen other facilities, ones in Font Hill that are active at the moment, and the light pollution that emanates from that is unbelievable. I can see it from my property where I live, and I'm in Beamsville. So if that answers your question.
No, I just trying to see if your opinion is influenced by the negative effects.
Directly in my
currently
neighborhood?
that's
No, not this
residents.
time.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Njima?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want a clarification. I think you're probably aware of this, but the first part of your presentation, you were talking about the cultivation of marijuana, and we did pass an interim control bylaw last week. Okay,
Because I never voiced my opinion on that to
Yep.
date, so.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to the person at the pedestal, I just wanted to thank you for coming out this evening. You know, one of the reasons we deferred our decision till this evening was because this council for the last 4 years, you know, has been very big on getting community engagement, and because we've been given a deadline of January 22nd, we didn't have that opportunity, we didn't have that liberty. So for the last 10 days, we've been trying to engage the public and trying to get information. So I really appreciate you coming here tonight and giving your opinion. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And was there just a telephone poll that was taken? And that was random selected residents?
We're going to have one of the staff speak to that issue, so
Okay. Okay,
we'll be able to provide you with that.
thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Now, I will, I'm going to ask now if there's anyone else in the audience who wasn't able to register according to our procedural bylaw. If they are interested, I will ask for a 2/3 majority from council and to allow you to speak. Can you just show me with a show of hands if there's anyone else that would like to speak about this? Okay, that's fine. This lady here, it doesn't matter who they are. We have 2 speakers. Are we willing to accept 2 these speakers coming forward? I'm looking for a 2/3 majority show of hands from speaker number 1. Fine, thank you. And for speaker number 2. And also speaker number 3. All right. Now, the same rules apply. The lady with the pink scarf on will have your information here very soon. The same rules apply. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. In this case, however, because you're not registered, if you would just state your name and your address, and if your name is not easy to spell, if you could help the clerk out. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Janine Hunick, Janine Hunink. I live on 2491 North Service Road in Jordan. I'm a longtime resident, actually a total Lincoln girl now. Grew up in Beansville, moved to Vineland for a few years, and now reside in Jordan. And I believe in endorsing, or sorry, I'm a little nervous. I believe in trying to keep everything to my community first, be it shopping, you know, the wine region, hiking. Like, I embrace Lincoln, and we have such a great community growing up here and that. And if you read my letter, I spoke of what my parents used to say to me when we used to hang downtown, because we were in a, you know, an area where it was supposed to be safe, fun, you know, but what it became a hangout for smoking, unfortunately, drugs, and which weren't legal. Cigarette smoking was legal, but just because something is legal doesn't mean it's always right. And it's really for our youth that my concern comes into, and I think a lot of citizens of Lincoln. I mean, 10 days is not enough to bring. I mean, I'm a little bit upset with how many people I see here tonight, because it's one thing we're not doing is speaking up for ourselves, and we're worrying what people are thinking when we speak up. I'm not against it. I'm against the fact of selling it in our community, in our downtown core, growing it in our community, around our homes. Like, I have been in the wine industry since 1998, retired from it now, but still very well involved. Grew up on the escarpment, hiked and, you know, played. And I don't want to see that destroyed. And we're more than just wine. We're cherries, Cherry Lane. People travel from Toronto to come here to pick our cherries and our tender fruit and everything. And we're only one of 3 places that grow tender fruit in Canada. What are we going to do? Import from the States and not look after our own? The reason people came here in the early settlers, and a lot of you it's your ancestry that brought us here. My parents came here from the Netherlands, and we settled here because it is such a great place to live, one of the most beautiful places. Now, greenhouses, you know what? It's a different form of agriculture, and not that I'm against it, but I don't know why it needs to be on our fertile land where we can grow things like using the land. Use the land that's hard to grow in, because they're not using our soil. They're just using our water, and there's tons of water, and this is going to be a multi-billion business, and I'm sure of it, because it's going to supply the world. But the problem is that they can, you know, start putting, carrying water to a location where community or where homes are not, families aren't living amongst it. And that's what my plea is that we keep it out of our community, the hub, and along the escarpment, and along our Great Lake, Lake Ontario, our streamways. This is not going to be good for it. There's always, for me, I live on the lake. We talk about services. I don't even have sewers, and I live on the lake. Like, so, you know, we can definitely, we can still have it, but we don't need it in our community. I don't think Lincoln doesn't have to be a part of it, but I really believe it can't be here, along the highway where things are influenced. I mean, I even can't stand the look of it. And the smell, I'm up on the Beansville bench, and what do I smell from the corner of Mountain View Road and number 8 Highway is marijuana. Skunk.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Don't leave,
Okay.
because there may be a question or two. Counselors, are there any questions of the presenter? Counselor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not have a question, but I did have a fairly lengthy conversation with Janine, and I just wanted to thank you for coming out tonight and expressing your views. You know, that's what we need to hear, and good on you.
Anyone else? Janine, I also want to thank you, and you made some very good points in regard to some of the information that will be required around the discussion of the interim control bylaw and the zoning of areas for growth. You may or may not be aware, but this is classified by the Ontario Federation of Agriculture as a crop, and it wouldn't be possible for the town to deny the growing of the crop, but your comments about where the crop should be grown would be very valuable again at that time. So you may want to prepare yourself to do this again. Thank you.
One other thing I wanted to say, which is about greenhouses. I mean, regardless of what's growing in a greenhouse, the light pollution, which Mrs. McKinney mentioned about, it is, it is a very big unbalance to the agriculture, the wild, what grows native, it also changes behavior of animals, changes behavior of us, and we really need to start controlling that. Controlling, because we know we can control things, because though cigarettes are legal, what have we done? We stopped it from in the public place, you know?
Janine,
And
I'm
we-
sorry.
Okay.
But I
Thanks.
will say to you that, that we do have a very strong policy here that's implemented around greenhouse lighting. And there would be an opportunity for you to even familiarize yourself with that by just asking to speak to the staff in the planning department. It would be very worthwhile. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Now, the next speaker is the lady here. Please come forward. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak, and if you would just give us your name and address and 5 minutes.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It's Helen Northcott. I live at 3420 Frederick Avenue in Vineland. And I'm a registered psychotherapist and a registered practical nurse. And I have built up my practice. And I moved here, and I moved into my location, and I looked up in those beautiful Niagara Escarpment, and I saw this really big house and had a lot of lights on it. And I was showing my cousin, and I said, "Look at that nice house up there with all those lights on." He says, that's not a house. He says, "It's a winery." And all these lights shining up there on this winery, you know? And so, you know, I see alcohol was first thought about as being medicinal.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I want you to get our full attention here, and I would ask that you speak to the matter at hand, and that is on the issue of the opt-in and opt-out.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So when you opt in, then whatever you do, you got consequences, right? And so if you opt in, then, you know, you're going to be selling a lot, and there's young people that are going to be buying it. So you can make decisions, but ultimately, the people who purchase the products from those retail stores, they're the ones that have to make the decision. So we have a work to do to educate people about the decisions they make and when they go into the retail stores, whether they're going to buy it or not. And so this is where education has to, there are some ads on in the newspaper about educating, but there needs to be more educational work done so people can make an informed decisions, because the government's going to do what they're going to do. You're going to do what you're going to do here, but the people that want to protect themselves need to inform themselves and make decisions as to whether they're going to buy it or not. That's the power of the public, and that's up to them. So whatever decision you make, ultimately it comes back on us as a consumer, whether we're going to choose to opt into buying it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman at the back, would you come forward, please? Oh, I'm sorry. I can't, I obviously have very poor distance vision. My apologies.
My name is Sandy Tantardini, Sanditantardini. I wasn't really prepared to speak, and I live at 5116 Meadowood Lane, and I'm in Beamsville. Mayor Easton, you and I had a conversation, so I'm bringing a little bit of a different perspective to the table, and I've spoken with Councillor Russell. I am very active in harm reduction and educating about stigma and fear-mongering. What I hear a lot with municipalities that are opting out is a lot of fear-mongering. I strongly support opting in. People can go anywhere they want to get marijuana. Everybody's got a guy if they're smoking marijuana. I don't smoke marijuana. If they open a store in Beamsville, I'm not going to be smoking marijuana tomorrow. I think with the crisis that we're facing in this region, and it's a huge crisis, the opioid crisis is costing us a lot. One of the things we're not talking about is the medicinal benefits of marijuana that will come to this community. And as a person who's lost someone to substance abuse, I wish that had been an option. So I think that part of what I'm saying is there's many facets to marijuana. We're growing it. It's going to keep growing. It's a legal crop. Marijuana is now legal. It's in our communities anyway, and I think that it would benefit the town to have some control over it. I would like to see people who are buying marijuana buy it from somebody reputable. It's a treatment option for a lot of people. I'm seeing that a lot now, medical marijuana. But people are doing it on their own. They're using marijuana to help with detoxing and things like that from opioids. So that's just kind of my take on it. And yeah, sorry, it's an emotional subject for me. I don't like the NIMBYism. It really disturbs me.
Thank you for your courage to come and speak with us. So I will ask councillors if you have any questions of the presenter. There being none, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for coming forward and providing us with your perspectives. We're going to move on now to correspondence. And I'll ask the clerk to consider 6.1, a memorandum around relating to council appointments. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So as you know, we are awaiting council appointments for the Heritage Committee, and while we were going to confirm that this evening, I also wanted to confirm the Committee of Adjustment and where your thoughts are moving forward with that. That's why I've attached the past report that was in regards to the Committee of Adjustment for your consideration. So if council has any questions about this motion, I'd be happy to answer them.
Madam Chair, or Madam Clerk, just so that I have it clear, the first item, which is the item regarding the Heritage Committee, are you looking tonight for 2 names?
I am, yes,
All
and
right.
that would be to move forward with the interview process and get that moving.
Okay, so we're looking for 2 names, and I'll ask members of council who are interested to just raise their hand. If necessary, we can have a vote. Well, there you go. We have 2 members. We have 3. All right. Okay, so Madam Clerk, how do you want to proceed? Do you have a ballot that you want us to use?
No, it would be by majority vote per member that's interested.
Per
So
member?
we could do
Okay.
that, yeah.
Okay. So, members of council, we have Councillor Brunet, we have Councillor Timmers, we have Councillor Mikulik. Beginning with Councillor Brunet, those who support Councillor Brunet, would you raise your hands? Okay, those who support Councillor Timmers, raise your hands. You can vote for yourselves. Okay, well, I'm counting, I'm going to count, okay, so, beg your pardon?
How many times can we vote? 2, right?
You can vote for 2. So the second candidate is Councillor Timmers. Would you please put your hands up again, just to help me out? Okay. And those who support Councillor Mikulik, raise your hands. Okay, now we have a tie. Madam Clerk, what are your instructions?
Chair breaks a tie.
Well, I will support Councillor Timmers based on her experience, and we'll be sending one experienced candidate, and we'll be sending a new candidate to maintain balance. That's my decision, my final decision. Thank you very much.
Can you just announce who that was, just for
Yes, so
the
the
video?
final decision is that the 2 representatives for the Heritage Committee will be Councillor Brunet and Councillor Timmers. Thank you very much, Councillor Mikulik, for putting your name forward. All right, now the second piece is in relation to the Committee of Adjustment. So I'm going to ask first if there are any questions, and I have Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we had a fairly lengthy discussion about this in the last term of council. We made a pretty significant move to move to 1 councillor on C of A. I do like the recommendation that you're making, and I do support it. And I particularly like the training that you have proposed, to have in-class training as well as the planning training. I can't think of the name of it. Primer and planning. So I think, and also to look for a particular type of individual or experience that individual has. So, I think it's a recommendation that came out of the report when we had that done. And maybe we weren't just brave enough to do that last term, but I like the proposal and I'd support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. As the past chair of the Committee of Adjustment, I absolutely support that there be no counselors on the committee. During the review that we went through, a very extensive review, and the consultant came back with the recommendation that there would be no counselors. And I supported it at that time, and I still support it, so I am absolutely 100% behind no counselors. I understand there's been a very good amount of applications, and there will be a very fulsome training and support moving forward with that committee. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm also in favor of the suggestion that we don't have any counselors on the Committee of Adjustment. I've been on the Committee of Adjustment for quite a few years, so I understand how it operates. And the training is extremely important, and I'm happy to see that we're going to commit ourselves to that, because there can be, the way we had the committee set up is that we would rotate on a regular basis. We would have 7 committee members, and 5 would sit at each meeting. So there would be people from the community that were on the committee, and 3 months could go by and they would have no experience, they would have no involvement whatsoever with planning issues in theory, and they'd come back 3 months later and have an agenda before them and had to make decisions, and really never had a lot of good training in place. So I appreciate the offer of putting training in place and that we be consistent with that, and I'm in favor of your recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo Councillor Rinjima's sentiments 100% as a member on the Committee of Adjustment for the last number of years. I've enjoyed my time. I've enjoyed the leadership of Councillor Timmers as chair, but I completely concur that this municipality should not be represented by municipal councillors. And certainly I wouldn't want to see another councillor go through what I went through just during the past election, which was a direct result of that committee adjustment ruling, which was all for the wrong reasons. So I certainly appreciate the staff's recommendation on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Russell, I believe that you were in the queue. Is that correct? No? All right, fine. Great. So the motion is, I'm going to ask for your support. Oh, we do have a green copy. Okay, I have a motion. Moved by Councillor Timmers and seconded by Councillor Mikulik, that council approve and appoint by majority vote 2 members of council to the Municipal Heritage Committee. And secondly, that council approve the Committee of Adjustment be only composed of non-elected representation. Through show of hands, all of those in favor? None opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now, Madam Clerk, while we're going through a couple of items here, would you provide me with a hard copy of the other motions? Yes. Okay, that's fine. I just, yeah, just as a reference. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Clerk. The next item on the agenda then is the consideration of item 7.1, AD 0119, Cannabis Public Opinion Phone Poll Results. And I'm going to turn to the Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Kirkopoulos, to make some comments, because I think it's worth hearing what's transpired during and from our decisions on January 7th to our point here tonight, January 21st. Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Before I turn it over to Ms. Beatty to take you through the particular report related to the public opinion piece, I did want to remind Council we were before you on January 7th, where we had a staff report and a staff recommendation as it relates to cannabis retail in the town of Lincoln, and that report is once again attached to this particular special council agenda. At that particular committee meeting, we had an extensive conversation, and council did direct staff to go away to look at, within a 2-week horizon, specifically a public opinion poll, something that could be done through the telephone to gauge our community's particular interest as it relates to cannabis and the decision around retail opt-in or opt-out. At that committee, and we've heard a lot of references this evening, we also dealt with another report, and that was specifically around the cultivation of cannabis. And council passed a interim control bylaw to prohibit cultivation for the duration of 1 year while we undergo a zoning bylaw review with the potential for a 2-year extension. I think it's important to highlight those were two very distinct reports, two very distinct presentation, and council's decision on that. There was also a motion that was put forward through Councillor McPherson and supported by all council that saw us go away and begin to pull together a number of agencies to look at what are some of the issues we can do in terms of addressing some of the concerns we heard from council. So whether that was odor, whether that's dealing with provincial agencies, federal agencies. And so going back to the 3 different items we dealt with, the one that was deferred is what you have before you. There's a deadline of January 22nd, which is tomorrow, and that is why we are before you here. I think it's important to highlight that staff did have a report that was suggesting at that particular point in time to opt out, and that as part of that we would do a more extensive engagement exercise. I think one of the comments that all staff made on that particular evening was the changing and dynamic landscape around this particular topic and the influx of information that we get still on I'd suggest on a weekly basis, if not every few days as it relates to cannabis. And that's really what led our recommendation, what led us to come up with what you have before you. I can tell you even since that time, new information has come forward in terms of shortages, when we expect cannabis to be available, and so forth. So what you have before you is 2 reports, and I will ask Ms. Beattie to provide you a high-level overview of our public opinion piece, and then a number of staff are here to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kirkopoulos. And Ms. Beattie, if you would proceed to provide any interpretation on your report, that would be appreciated.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. CEO, for those introductory comments. In addition to PD 0119, the report that you will consider next, that was deferred because the staff recommendation was to opt out. Within that report was also the recommendation to conduct extensive public engagement, as our CAO indicated, and to take several months to do that. So at that meeting, the report was deferred and staff was directed to do a form of public engagement. So at that time, my recommendation was to conduct a phone poll. It would be the only valid instrument or tool within that 10-day time frame. So prime contact was selected, and the poll was conducted from January 11th through 14th and resulted in 551 randomly selected respondents. So that's a significant sample size for our community. With our population, about 300 is what would be considered statistically relevant. As a result of the poll, it was found that Lincoln residents were split on this decision on whether private regulated cannabis retail locations should exist. So 53% were against allowing retail locations, and 46 people would either allow it or allow it at a later date. So 31% said allow it, and 14.5% said to allow it at a possible later date. And that's the results of the poll.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beattie. And I'll now turn to, I'm sorry, you're so quick off the mark. I'm looking to do this a little bit differently. I wanted to make sure that everyone is able to ask all of their questions, so we'll be bypassing some of the what is outlined in the procedural bylaw, where we're limited to 2 questions. I'd like to start with Councillor Russell and have people queue up if they wish, and then we will begin again until all the questions are answered. And Madam Clerk, would you please prepare for a recorded vote as we move along on these 2 matters. So, Councillor Russell, I will cue you in. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Beattie. The numbers that we received through the phone poll, do you have any specific data on number of people in each of those categories? Like, is it a reflection of our town? I know that in past presentations, we have about a 43-year average age, and then we have some demographics based on age cohort. Is this a good reflection of that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Excellent question, Councillor. And I should have mentioned that in the report. So the data is weighted. So what that means is for this particular type of analysis, what they do is weight the distribution, and so it's representative of our population. So we don't need to know specific percentages of each age group, but we did have representation from 18 through 65 plus. And what they do is then analyze that and make it proportionate to our population. So the results are reflective of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start by saying that I don't have particular concerns with legalization, cultivation if we have controls, or the retail sale of cannabis if we have controls, we being the town of Lincoln, generally, but this is all new for us. I feel like what we're getting, the information that we're getting from the province and the federal government is we're being asked to make a decision on fear of missing out on funding particularly. So to me, this is a two-pronged approach to look at this decision. From what I've seen before us in the report, there's an economic development approach and there's a planning approach. My understanding is that this report was circulated to all staff that economic development looked at it, and I haven't heard any alarms raised with the idea of opting out. Planning is advising against, and again, the report was circulated, and staff have advised against. We're being told that our zoning bylaw will not apply. That is the loss we should be focusing on, in my opinion. We can opt out now and opt in later. Why would we opt in out of fear of loss of a theoretical funding model when we can wait and opt in later when we choose? And we can take the time to advocate for our zoning controls. Remember that if there are problems that we have no control over, who is to blame? Us, the municipality. That is the perception generally, and may not always be the truth, but the reality is we deal with the problems. So we should be certain that we have the tools in place to control. So my question is, has anything changed as far as our zoning bylaw having an effect? That's my question through to staff.
Right, I believe that question, you're looking for that question to Mr. Bruder?
Probably to Mr. Bruder, yeah.
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, not necessarily in terms of municipal land use controls applying. Haven't seen any clarification in that regard or any changes since the last time we were in front of you. We heard earlier today about the supply and the next round of licensing and when that could occur, but otherwise in terms of the actual controls that are afforded to the municipality, there hasn't been any change that I'm aware of to date.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll state now that I'll be voting against opting in. So voting in favor of opting out, that will be my vote.
Okay, the clerk has given me some advice here on procedure. The questions at the moment are strictly related to the report of Ms. Beattie, so I would ask that further questions, because we will be going around, it's just a way of maintaining the focus where it needs to be for now, but there will be an opportunity to have some more questions, which obviously will include Mr. Bruder. I don't see any other names here. Is there anyone on this side of the table that has any questions regarding the report? And on to my left, anyone on the left side? I have Councillor Mikulik.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Carrie, I'm just curious, was there another question? There was another question that was posed to the people with regards to if they felt that the 150 meters was far enough from a retail store. Can you tell me the results of that question?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Mikulik. There was a second question asked on the poll with not the intention of in giving information to this particular report, so that's why it wasn't included. The reason we asked the question was we had people already discussing cannabis, so I thought it was a great opportunity to ask about that in relation to the interim control bylaw in terms of zoning as one input. As we know, we're going to do extensive engagement. So the results, though, of that particular question were that 75% of respondents do not feel 150 meters is the buffer zone is far enough away from schools. It was specific to asking about schools.
Okay, so, and second question, like, with regards to just about the split, I'm reading 31% were for retail and 14 perhaps later. Does that sort of leads me to believe that number, 45% or so, is almost choosing to opt out for now and opt in later, perhaps?
Ms. Beatty?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Mikulik. So that particular statistic, the opting out later, the 14.5%, or sorry, opting in, but considering to allow later, the question, they were prefaced with the information, they were given a bit of context prior to the questions, and so they were informed that we don't have as much municipal control currently under the regulation. So I think the respondents in terms of that question, I mean, I can't speak on their behalf, but I think what they were saying was that they may opt in, but given the current regulations, maybe at a later date. So that's how I would interpret that particular piece.
And then, I'm looking at this report as well, and I was a little bit surprised by the 18 to 35 age group, where 60% the town of Lincoln should not allow private retail marijuana stores. That I'm surprised by that age group. I would have expected that to be of the the more senior group.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, Mayor.
Ms. Beatty? Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Through you to Ms. Beatty. Out of the 8,700 possible households that could be contacted, there were 551 people. I feel, again, this is a snapshot. I've used that term before. My thoughts are, where are the 551 people? Lincoln's a big town. We're multiple different areas. Was that at all tracked, like where those phone calls, was it equally spread from one end of the town to the other, from the below the escarpment to above? I'm just curious if that was tracked.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Timmers, no, that was not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, to Ms. Beatty. What was the actual question that was asked? So it was, the town of Lincoln should allow private retail marijuana stores? Was that the actual question that was asked to the respondents?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor. The question was, after hearing the introductory comments, the town of Lincoln must make a decision to either allow private retail marijuana stores, do not allow private retail marijuana stores, or do not allow private retail marijuana stores at this moment, but possibly at a later date. The options they were given were allow private retail, should not allow at the moment, but possibly at a later date, and unsure or no opinion.
Okay, and then a follow-up to that. So only because the city of St. Catharines did a telephone poll, And then the city of Port Colborne did a telephone poll, and they asked questions similar to this, but then reworded the questions based on the continuation of what we know. You know, opting in will allow, you know, access to the excise tax money currently at this, and it changed dramatically. So just curious, personal opinion, if it might change. I mean, we had one shot at this, and unfortunately, this is what we have. But just, it's all about, having been in this, it's all about framing questions, and it's about an inherent bias. So I'm worried that those initial comments might have created a bias in the proponent's response.
Could you speak specifically to the limitations of this process?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So just to first give some context to the questions and the development of those questions, they were done by a national research company who are experts in polling and who understand the relevance of bias and removing any of that. So these questions developed are sound questions. I can't speak to other municipalities. My recommendation was not to ask people about something that we don't know 100%. So asking them about potential funding, potential opportunity down the road would actually be misleading. And that was also the advice of the polling company. We did use a different polling company from the other municipalities who were using a templated questionnaire. So I can't really speak to theirs other than they used a different
Any other questions, councillors? All right, I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell and seconded by, I think it's Councillor Mikulik. I can't read this signature, I'm sorry. Councillor Reimer. And the motion reads that council receive for information the cannabis public opinion phone poll results, report AD-02-19. Your pleasure on the motion. None opposed, the motion is carried. All right, now we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next piece, and we're going to consider 7.2 PD 01-19, the question of cannabis retail in the town of Lincoln. Now, obviously, I have two motions, so I'm going to start with the first motion, which is the opt-in motion, and I need a mover and a seconder. I'm calling for a mover. Thank you very much, Councillor McPherson. And the seconder, Councillor Russell. And while we're just waiting for that, then I'll start, we'll start the questions. If you would cue in for the questions, please. On this side of the table. Go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess through to Mr. Bruder and Mr. Kirkopoulos. So,
I'm sorry, Councillor Pachariva, I need to do this correctly.
okay,
I need to read this motion.
motion, and then we'll have the
yes,
discussion on the
And then you'll
motion.
have the discussion.
Gotcha.
All right, I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Russell, that council notify the Ontario Alcohol and Gaming Commission on or before January 22nd, 2019, that the town of Lincoln opts in and does allow for the location of private recreational cannabis retail stores within the municipality, and that the municipality prepare and adopt a municipal cannabis retail store policy statement to be utilized as the primary guide in providing municipal comments to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. in response to applications for the establishment of private recreational cannabis retail stores within the municipality, and that staff be directed to report back on other issues affecting the municipality related to legalization of cannabis. And that a letter be sent to the Premier and appropriate ministries requesting that municipalities be given greater regulatory authority for input and control regarding, number one, the location and distance separation from sensitive uses such as parks, schools, daycare, and healthcare facilities. 2, advertising and signage. 3, hours of operation. 4, ability to restrict or prohibit operations that violate municipal standards such as noise, nuisance, or property standards. And 5, the number of retail stores within their limits. I'll now entertain questions. Please go ahead, Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess a question to both Mr. Karkopoulos and Mr. Bruder. So, having, followed what's transpired since our last meeting, knowing that there's 25 provincially, knowing that there's 7 granted from Niagara to Fort Erie, knowing that it's cities over 50,000. So we're not going to see this in the first round. And seeing what some of the other municipalities have done, and I'm thinking of St. Catharines specifically, so bringing in, like we did with the production, an interim control bylaw to establish retail locations, would that address some of these concerns?
Gentlemen?
Through you, Madam Mayor, why don't I start answering the councillor's question, and then Matt can definitely chime in if I've missed something. But we don't have that regulatory control at this particular point in time in terms of an interim control bylaw as it relates to retail operations, councillor. And so I think the reason you're seeing one of the additions to this motion, outside of saying just opt in, is for that very reason. A number of us have gotten together, and I think you're seeing more from around the GTA, including Toronto, including Hamilton, Burlington, others that have chosen to opt in, seeking that regulatory control. And so I think there's some strength in numbers, adding our voice to that similar ask. So one of the things you'll see in that motion, should council decide to opt in, is that request for more regulatory control. It is something that I think, notwithstanding whatever decision is made, is the right move in terms of advocating with the province and the Premier.
All right, is that satisfactory?
That is very
Councillor?
satisfactory.
All right, I'm going to start, all right, Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Madam
Go
Mayor.
ahead.
Through you to the CAO, is there a guarantee that they will grant our requests or any municipality's requests that we've stated in the opting in option?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, there is not, councillor. I think one of the comments that staff made at the previous meeting was that, notwithstanding, again, whatever decision council makes, this does seem to be a moving target, so to speak, with the provincial government. The landscape is changing fairly regularly. So as much as I would love to tell you that we will be granted that regulatory control at this particular point in time, we can't confirm that is the case.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions on this side of the table? Councillor Russell, Councillor Benjima, Councillor Brunet, Councillor McPherson? No question. Councillor Timmers, Councillor Reimer. All right, Madam Clerk, we have the motion on the table.
Can we make comment?
Yes, yes.
Now or later?
No, you can make them now. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I think there's a number of things here, and some of the delegations touched on them tonight. I think the first thing we're making any decision on a legal product. It's a legal product, and it's not a question of this town bringing an illegal store in and opening for business. So I think we've got to be very careful in walking down that road of being big brother or big sister, on what is coming here. I think the other thing that we got to be aware of is, we all know cannabis is available online. All of our residents can get cannabis today. We also have heard this week that St. Catharines, Thorold, Niagara Falls, Fort Erie, and I believe Port Colborne have opted in. Grimsby's going to decide that tonight, so we may have Grimsby opting in. So, it's not that we're an island out here on our own, that, we're making this decision and that we're going to have all of Niagara coming to our store. That's not going to happen. So I think we've got to kind of put it in perspective. Personally, I think the bigger decision we made 2 weeks ago, with the interim bylaw, I think that was the tougher decision for us, was how do we put a stop on, jobs coming to our town and the expansion of an industry. And we made that decision. The retail side of it, to me, is a simpler decision. I think that from the report standpoint, appreciate Carrie and all the work that she did to put that together very quickly. I would say 6 months from now, those numbers won't change. That we will have a split community on this issue. That if we opt out now, I don't think we're going to get any more answers than we have tonight. And I think it's absolutely critical that we make the decision tonight and not wait, because I think the economic side of this thing is significant. That we could be in for some significant financial support by opting in. So I think that's an important piece of this. But I made a lot of notes here, so just let me make sure that I've got. The other thing is, we did have a couple of young men here talking about their store, and I'm seeing a fairly significant investment in starting up a store. I don't think it's going to be everybody that's going to be able to put together a vault, all of the security around a store, and from a financial standpoint, that's a significant barrier to entry. So I don't expect that we're going to see a bunch of people lining up, tomorrow to invest in a store. That is a major financial decision to get involved in that. I agree. I think it was Councilor Pachariva with the fact that demand is so significant right now that I can see us not having a store, even if we opt in tonight, not having a store for a year or 2 years. It could be that long before they get their demand in line and they start coming down to our size of town. So I don't see this necessarily as a moral issue. I think that the cannabis is available. It's available. And, is there controls that we need to have in place? Absolutely. Do we have all the answers? No, we don't. But should that prevent us from taking that step to opt in today and take advantage of the financial funds that are coming our way as a result of that? And I'm not talking about the $12,000 that's coming. I'm talking about down the road, the excise tax, and that could be a significant amount of money. I appreciate Mishka talking tonight about tourism, because obviously, that is a significant industry in our town. It's absolutely critical for us, and for us to not opt in, I think really sends the wrong message. That we're not open to that, and I hate to go back to the 60s or the 70s, but that was a time when we didn't allow alcohol in this town either, and I don't support us going back to that. So I am obviously all opt-in, and we make the decision tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I'll call now on Councillor Russell. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, some comments I have. Just when I was knocking on doors during the election, one of the questions I was asking was with regards to cannabis retail. As I knew at that time, we would be facing this night. The majority at the time was against, but there was those that were for. So knowing that, I took the time to do my research, and quite a bit of research I did, and exploring both arguments. And I figure the easiest way is to research this is to consult with those that have been there and that have done that. So what I did was I looked up a couple of cities in Colorado, similar to our own, and I contacted a gentleman named Phil Thomas from Fountain, Colorado. He's a counselor there, and a city clerk named Susan Coster from Lafayette, Colorado. And they spoke to me about what this decision they had to face, which they called it Amendment 64. And both, the decision they had to make was similar, the opting in, the opting out, with money being involved, with finance and, that sort of thing, and the promise of they called it like a gold rush. So both had said, without hesitation, not to surrender your ability or our ability to control zoning, bylaw control, to control zoning, bylaw controls, and/or land use regulations. I fear by opting in at this time, we'll be giving up all of those should our requests be denied. The province has already made a majority of Lincoln residents nervous, according to the poll, which could be right or could be wrong, of 75%. But the first bylaw they instituted with the 150-meter distance, 75% are already against that. So they've basically started out in a tricky step. So therefore, with this in mind, I have difficulty at this time opting in. I have no doubt whatsoever we'll be debating this issue again. However, it'll be on our terms at a municipal level rather than those set out at a provincial level. And that's my opinion at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Like all the councillors here, I've thought long and hard, and I've consulted a number of my constituents. And the big thing that comes to me is, once you put the stigma aside, is that, again, as Councillor McPherson had already mentioned, is that it is now a legal product. And to me, it is based on market demand. So opting in now, if the market does not meet the demand, then, or the demand does not meet the market, that will be dictated how many stores are potentially could be in Lincoln. Again, I look at some of the other jurisdictions around us, the other municipalities, and again, you've seen a bunch of them near us that have already opted in, and Grimsby is voting tonight. So as Councillor McPherson had mentioned, we're not going to have a stampede of people coming from out of town likely to visit our locations if we are to ever receive them. So whatever business is going to be received is going to be from in town. So if the market is there, to me, again, that just shows that our clientele or our constituents, that is a need for them. So to me, you let the marketplace set the standard whether or not one store is viable, 2 stores, 3 stores, 4 stores, whatever it might be. You have to let the open marketplace decide. So that's why I think it should be a opt-in.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to look again. Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of comments that tie into that some of the councillors have already brought up, but just wanted to piggyback on them. For a lot of us, I think, and for myself included, this consultation began the day we got certified as candidates in summer. That was a topic that wasn't front and foremost on a campaign conversation, but it was certainly there. All the issues related to it. And we saw with the full gallery here on the 7th as well, the the input from our constituents. A couple topics kind of float to the top. One is the legalization, and I think it's not confusion, I would say passion about the subject would lead them into a spot of, or a position of opting out simply because they're against marijuana. So as has been pointed out here already, it is a legal product. We are, it's legal in Canada. I have a son who attends a high school here, and I think it's, with regards to the youth issue, which was also brought up, it's prudent on me as a parent to inform him how we feel of all the, my wife and myself, how we feel about cannabis, about alcohol, about all kinds of things that young people are going to face growing up. So it's my job to make sure he can make a smart decision, because the vast majority of his decisions are not going to be whether to go into a store. It's whether to buy it out of a baggie at the corner of the high school. That's where his decision is going to be. So nothing we do here can help him with that. That's imperative of me as a parent. And the second, or sorry, the biggest one by far, and I think we've addressed that with our interim bylaw, was the cultivation, the odor and the light pollution. The potential for that has been, we've heard that at all kinds of places. Every coffee shop conversation, hardware store, arena conversation, that has come to the forefront. And I think we've addressed that with interim bylaw, and I think that staff understand that we are. That's something we really want to sink our teeth into in the next year. And those are the comments I have to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Njima.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to reinforce the comments I said earlier on. Again, I'm not against this for a moral reason or whether my impetus for opting out and wanting to opt out has nothing to do with whether I think it's right or wrong to have cannabis in our community. It's, again, the fact that we're being told that our zoning bylaws will not apply and will have no effect. And I think that's wrong. I think that's a kind of fear-mongering in and of itself. And I think that we have the option later on to opt in, at which time the market will dictate where stores go, where they don't go. In the meantime, we can do our own research and we can advocate for having our zoning bylaw have effect, and that we can have control of what happens in our community, which is what zoning bylaws are for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. I'll be happy when this evening is over, because this has been on my mind for months. And I'm going to be completely honest. I have been on the fence. I've gone both ways. I've been undecided. But I think what really changed my mind was getting a phone call from an elderly couple who live in my neighborhood who have serious health issues. And they have found that the CBD oil has changed the wife's life. And they're worried because they are elderly and they don't know how they can continue to get a supply, or they don't do online. They had someone help them. So they said to me, we really need this store. We need a store. We want to be able to go there and get what we need. So I made a little list also as well. You know, it's legal. It's a legal product. It's here already. It's been here for generations, but it's been here in the black market. It's been here as an illegal, and it's not regulated, the illegal stuff. It's not safe. I worry about what's in it. Our kids are smoking that, whether we like to admit it or not, they are. Maybe not all of them, but there are a lot that do. And we're growing it here. Some of the public want it, and some of the public don't. There's funding available if we opt in. Opting out is only temporary. It will be here. Opting out doesn't mean that we will never have it here. It will come eventually. There are medicinal benefits. There are a lot of benefits to people with addiction issues and harm reduction, as we heard from Sandy. And anyone who knows someone who suffered from an addiction, if they could go to a store and buy this, maybe it would have saved their life. There's strict rules that will be in place, so there won't be underage buyers. You can't go in and buy alcohol if you're underage, and you're not going to be buying cannabis if you're underage either. But yet, kids are buying it now, and they're underage. So I don't think someone who's putting a ton of money into a retail store wants to lose their license because they sold to an underage kid. That's not going to happen. I'm also thinking the illegal selling of the product that's happening day to day, hopefully that'll end it. People can go and buy it legally. People can buy it online all day long. So that's the end of my list. So I've been through lists. I've read it all. I even interviewed a kid that lives in Colorado as well. My nephew lives there. And so with all that said, I'm going to be opting in tonight. So thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship. You know what, same kind of comments as Councillor Timmers made tonight and Councillor McPherson. I mean, I was kind of looking at it as an economic driver. But it was the telephone calls that I got this weekend. It was the emails that I got this weekend. It was the Facebook requests and messages following that I got that actually shocked me. A lady who I've known since I was this high called and said, you know, you really need to do this. And I said, why? And she said, I've been taking the CBD oil for the past 15 years. 15 years ago, I couldn't walk. And now I could be the poster child. And I said to her, Mrs. E, it's never too late to be a poster child for something that you believe in. And all of these, like the benefits of it, and these people coming and saying that, you know, this would allow them a place to go. They wouldn't have to buy it online. The sales are controlled and they become legitimate, so there's a tax component to it. I remember my mother ordering beer from the beer store in Grimsby and having it delivered here by Smiley, who, if he did break a smile, would crack his face because it wasn't allowed. And I think it's kind of hypocritical when we look at it, is that we're taking these people's tax money and then not allowing them a retail storefront. I don't think we dream of doing that with a winery or a distillery or a brewery. They're all legal commodities. We need to put our moral platitudes aside and say, how can we make the best of this situation? And you look at the rollout, it's not coming in a year. It's probably not coming in 2 years. But by that time, we'll be able to get the proper zoning in place. Like Councillor McPherson said, I think the big step was 2 weeks ago when we put the interim control bylaw in for the production. And during that time, and Janine, some of your comments, like restricting that to up over the escarpment, restricting that to special places. We probably should have done that in the 1980s with the proliferation of greenhouses, but I wasn't around then. So this is my opportunity to maybe right or wrong, to maybe make a difference. You know, we're talking about generation of $12,000 on a split of $40 million. Well, if Mishka, who's, you know, and I value her opinion, you know, Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce has got the figure sales of $3 billion coming with a tax of $600 million. We get a portion of that excise tax. So just doing simple math of if it was, you know, 40 million generating 12,000, 600 million would generate 120,000. And that's if it was 40 and 400. It's going to be 600. Could be $200,000 that we could be taking off the table by not opting in. It's that gold rush. It's that casino money that we would be turning our backs on. And like Councillor Timmer said, it's coming. But it's not coming today. And we have time to do our homework. And we have time to do an interim control bylaw to restrict retail shops. The retailers are going to do their due diligence. They're going to, it's not going to be that Cheech and Chong up and smoke store, and there's not going to be one on every corner. They're going to be run professionally because they wouldn't want to jeopardize their license. So simply from an economic point of view, I'm saying opt-in.
Thank you very much. I see no other speakers. Do you require me to read the motion again? Yes? Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson and seconded by Councillor Russell, that council notify the Ontario Alcohol and Gaming Commission on or before January 22nd, 2019, that the town of Lincoln opts in and does allow for the location of private recreational cannabis retail stores within the municipality, and that the municipality prepare and adopt a municipal cannabis retail store policy statement to be utilized as the primary guideline in providing municipal comments to the AGCO in response to applications for the establishment of private recreational cannabis retail stores within the municipality, and that staff be directed to report back on other issues affecting the municipality related to legalization of cannabis, and that a letter be sent to the Premier and appropriate ministries requesting that municipalities be given greater regulatory authority for input and control regarding, number one, the location and distance separation from sensitive uses such as parks, schools, daycare, and healthcare facilities. Number two, advertising and signage. 3, hours of operation. 4, ability to restrict or prohibit operations that violate municipal standards such as noise, nuisance, or property standards. And 5, the number of retail stores within their limits. And I will ask you again, are there any further questions? Then I will ask the clerk to record the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I call your name, please vote either yay or nay. Councillor Brunet. Yay. Yay. Councillor McPherson. Yay. Councillor Miklick. Nay. Councillor Pachariva. Yay. Councillor Reimer. Councillor Rajima.
Nay.
Councillor Russell. Yay. Councillor Timmers.
Yay.
Madam Mayor.
Vote is carried. That being the result of the vote, it is not necessary, Madam Clerk, unless you advise me otherwise, for us to be discussing an opt-out motion. Thank you. Thank you to the staff for the preparation of the all of the documentation and reports, and to Carrie Beattie in particular for your efforts around the public opinion poll. We move on now to item number 8. Motion to receive and file information items, and we have none. Item 9, motion to consider confidential items, and we have none. The motion to approve bylaws, we have none this evening. A motion to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting. I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik and seconded by Councillor Timmers that leave be given to introduce bylaw 2019-03 to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by council resolution. That bylaw 2019-03 be passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. All of those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer and seconded by Councillor Timmers that special council on January 21st, 2019 be adjourned. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And I declare the motion, or the meeting adjourned. Thank you.